welcome back to Room 237, and I'm back with another review. Now, this was a movie that I meant to review probably 2.5 months ago when I originally picked this up and when I originally saw it. But I was watching a bunch of things at that time. It was during the transition of the move. I reviewed other things that kind of got away from me, so I just rewatched it, and I'm going to review it. And it's a movie that came out last year, so I'm going to save spoilers. I will give a warning. But it's also a sequel. And before I get into it, I've said this a lot, and I will probably preach this forever. When you have a film that is a hit, because the original film was a pretty big hit, even if it's part of a genre that there's many examples of, but it finds a way to stand out, it does something unique and cool and different, and people really respond to it. I'd much rather see it be left as a one and done. I'm a huge fan of the first film. Came out in 2016. One of my favorite horror films of that decade, the 2010s. Top 10, maybe not, but top 15, top 20, absolutely. Actually, it might be a top 10. But I love the first film. Even if it's left open-ended, a lot of times I think that even serves the movie better, like the original Halloween. At first, I wasn't too pleased. I didn't even see a trailer for this, but I was just like, I was at the store one day and I saw that it was out, and I was like, oh, they did make a sequel to that? All right. But I have mixed feelings. It's nowhere near the original, of course. But again, it's 2021's Don't Breathe 2. Now, I have reviewed this. I am a huge fan of this film. I love Don't Breathe. I mean, it's acted well, great atmosphere, good story, but also a good way to tackle the home invasion genre. And not only that, home invasion, but like the sort of sub home invasion where we follow the intruders and they break into the wrong house. Like people under the stairs or the collector. Some really good visual and stylistic choices in this film. Yeah, it does take a drastic turn in the third act, but I still love Don't Breathe. Now with this, I will say it did accomplish a lot of what a sequel should be. It did go much bigger than the first one. I kind of liken this duology to The Collector and The Collection. The Collector was sort of a low-key home invasion film, whereas the second one, there's an army of people all armed. They all have weapons, big building. It starts off like the first film, a home invasion, but then, we get to the rundown hotel, and it's a much bigger film, much bigger body count. It does find a different way to go about the story. It does flip the Norman Nordstrom character, Stephen Lang, the blind man, going from the completely twisted antagonist of the first film to being the guy that we root for in this. He's like the hero. And I'm not quite sure what to say about it. It accomplishes enough in some ways, but then other times it feels like, almost would have been better if this was just left alone. But you do have the same creative team behind it, which does help. I mean, Sam Raimi, he even called the script for this the greatest idea for a sequel that he's ever seen or that he's ever heard of. And Sam Raimi wrote and directed Evil Dead 2. So, come on. But, yeah, it was directed by, if I can't pronounce this correctly, Rodo Sayagas, who co-wrote the film with Fede Alvarez. it, as he did with the first film, but Fede Alvarez, director of the Evil Dead remake, which I love. It's still my favorite remake, 2003 to present. So Alvarez stepped down, but he's still the writer, producer. Sayaga stepped up as director. It was produced by Alvarez and Sam Raimi. It does look a lot like the first film. You know, it definitely feels like it's the same world and the same creative team. But you got Pedro Luke, if I pronounce that correctly, as the cinematographer, which, of course, that's too small to see, so it doesn't say who the cinematography was, but okay. And music by Roque Banos, if I pronounce that correctly. I did really like the music. The music was well done. Now, obviously, this was not as big of a hit as the first one. It had about $4 or $5 million more dollars to play with as far as budget goes. I don't really see it. I mean, sure, it might be more of an effects film than the first one. Explosions, gunfire, stuff like that. More action. But it did make back double its budget. But nowhere near like a $9 million budget to $140, $150 million gross of this film. This is a certifiable hit. And you could chalk it up to, 2021, COVID still going on. People still aren't quite going out to the movies, but it definitely got far lesser reviews than the first one. But, and of course, Stephen Lang, he returned. He's great. He's still awesome. He's still a badass. He's still a guy you don't want to mess with. But you also have Brendan Sexton III, Madeline Grace, Adam Young, Bobby Schofield, Stefan Rodri, and Fiona O'Shaughnessy. Stefan Rodri, he actually looked familiar. Oh, he was in Harry Potter. Nothing else I've seen. No, but and I will it does have a lot of callbacks and notes to the first film, which are fine, but it's flipped. Like a lot of what the trio went through in this film happens to Stephen Lang in this film. Like say a character in the first film fell out or jumped out of a window, landed on a greenhouse window, and it's cracking underneath him. That happens to Stephen Lang. Vicious Rottweiler chases him in that film. Vicious Pitbull chases Stephen Lang in this film. And apparently Jane Levy was not interested at all in a sequel. So you could have done what probably was the most reasonable way to go, which is Stephen Lang goes after her to get his money back, which could have been interesting. A blind guy who's very skilled at things, but in an environment he's not familiar with Jane Levy who can see and knows where she is, but can't go up against him. That could have been pretty interesting. And it does kind of go in that direction in the second half, but they do raise the stakes, which is probably the thing I can give the best. That's probably my biggest compliment, was it did raise the stakes in the best way. Of course, spoilers for this if you haven't seen this yet, but we do know that Stephen Lang's goal is to impregnate a woman so he can replace the daughter that he lost. Well, in this, it shows that he has a, I think, 12-year-old daughter named Phoenix. Of course, like the first film, where the first one, it opened up with him dragging a girl down the street, and then we cut to the story. Here, it's like a 4-year-old girl walking down the street away from a house fire. She collapses. Then we jump 8 years, and it's Stephen Lang's daughter. But he's super strict. He has her homeschooled and do this rigorous survival training. She wants to be a normal kid, but he's too afraid of losing her again. It hints that there's these human organ traffickers about. Oh, I do want to say it. I'm not sure where the first film was shot. I guess this was shot in Serbia. I guess they did a good job at making it look like Detroit. I will say it's not as near atmospheric as the first film. Whether it be just outside or definitely within the house, it's not near as atmospheric. So these organ traffickers, they're the ones that break in. It starts off with four guys, and then two more show up. And I mean, we saw in the first film what this guy does when people just break into his house. What kind of a force he is. And the knowledge we have of Stephen Lang in this film, going into it with this, and when that girl is threatened, okay, these aren't just people breaking in. They're coming in to take his reason to live, his daughter. So it really should have amped up the violence, the rage, the anger, the carnage. It kind of doesn't, really. I mean, I guess some scenes are bloodier and more violent, but he really becomes the hunted very quick. Uh, my favorite aspect of the first film, which is the dead silent cat and mouse stuff, where there's no score, no audio, except for the slight footsteps or whatever, with like the one single take tracking shot through the house, like when the characters are hiding and Stephen Lang coming around, like whether it goes under a bed or through a wall or up over like something, then underneath something. One continuous take. I'm a sucker for that anyway. It kind of does that in the beginning of the invasion when we see them going after his daughter Phoenix, but it doesn't do it for long. I mean, in almost no time, it stops doing that, which I was kind of bummed out because that was some of my favorite bits in this film. And I think those are the more stylish moments that I really liked about the first one. And I mean, you get him put like super glue over a guy's nose and mouth, because he put super glue on a cut, and then he puts it over this guy's nose and mouth, and then his brother comes in, and instead of just fixing it, he just stabs his cheek to breathe through, and then the guy just cuts it with glass. So I like the aspect of, okay, it's not just a break-in. They're coming in to take his daughter, so really raising the stakes on how crazy this guy's going to get. But they really do get the best of him, which, I mean, obviously because the second half needs to happen. As far as the twists go, because it does kind of have twist after twist, almost, I kind of feel like they did that just because the first movie had a twist, or because it, like the first movie where we're supposed to feel bad for Stephen Lang, then we see how he is, so then we gotta root for the intruders. This, it kind of plays with our expectations on who we should root for, which I think that does okay, but just, I guess aspects all around, I don't think are as strong as the first film. And yeah, it does go much bigger. Eventually they do get the girl, and then he has to, this blind guy has to find out where they are and then go save her or go take her back. And even when he does that, it's not like there's a whole lot of these torture revenge scenes. In fact, there's one scene where he takes out like 4 or 5 at once. I think it could have been cooler if each one kind of got like their own individual ultra-violent, crazy revenge. I mean, we established how badly he wants a daughter in this one. So, you think that's what, you know, now that he has it, and it establishes he's not even willing to send her to school because he's afraid of losing her, that, you know, he should have gone apeshit on each guy. But I mean, it's not a bad movie. It's not a bad sequel. I mean, I think it followed it up. It followed up the first film as good as it could. As far as some of the cool stuff he does as the blind guy, you know, like, well, first, another thing that made me think of the collector is there's like a little shipping container in their basement that's sort of like their panic room that the girl's supposed to run to. Well, she does, but then one of the guys puts a hose in it to fill it up. Then when Stephen Lang comes down, he puts a live wire in it to touch the water. But then they have a fight. Stephen Lang throws out a gas can so the guy can't shoot at him. And then just when the guy's about to kill him, Stephen Lang, he's laying on the floor with the table. He's already pulled the wire out. He just like rolls and pulls the table and throws the wire over, so it causes an explosion. Or, you know, when he gets to the hotel to get his daughter back, he has this bell, which he gets their dog. Their dog sides with him. He ties a bell to the dog's collar so he can hear it, but he's got another one. And he's fighting this one guy, and he just hits him with the bell so it like gets stuck in his throat. So when the guy moves, it jingles so he can hear him, and he throws the hammer at him and gets him. Or there's like this ankle-deep water in this one room, and he's laying in it as a trap. And it shows that when these 4 guys step in it, the camera follows this ripple. So as soon as it touches his hand, he knows that's where they are, and he shoots them all. So it does do some cool stuff with his blindness. It shows how he, you know, how he's able to find and get people. I was satisfied with that. I don't think there was enough cat and mouse, like silence through the house trying to hide, as with the first film. I don't think it was as stylish. Like those single tracking shots through walls or overhead, kind of almost as if you're looking through like a model of a house. Maybe not that zoomed out, but you know, going through a wall this way and this way. Not near as much as the first film. I do think they should have just gone all out with the blood and gore instead of most people being killed by gunfire. I mean, some people do get brutal deaths, sure, but, you know, for how high the stakes are, I feel like it should have had more. Now, I'm going to get into the twist, so I'm going to get into spoilers. If you are a huge fan of this film, I guess it's it's definitely worth checking out. It's definitely worth seeing, okay, let's see what more this guy can do. And he finally succeeded in having his daughter. So what happens when that's jeopardized? Like I said, we saw what happens when people break in, but what about when, you know, his life, the reason why he lives is at stake? And just kind of taking the concept of the first one and just going bigger and more action-packed with it. I'm a bigger fan of the low-key, more quiet, stylish original, which is why I like the collector more than the collection. But, you know, obviously, don't be surprised if it's not as good as the first one. I've seen a lot of comments and a lot of reviews where if a movie's not as good, people just go right to the top shelf and be like, it's garbage, it's trash, it's dumpster fire, not as good as the first one. even if it's decent, or even if it's like 1% lower, they don't want to give it credit. Even though I don't think it was as successful with what it was trying to do as the first one. I mean, I was still entertained. I still loved watching Stephen Lang do his thing. And of course, every time he gets beaten, and every time he's outsmarted, or every time, you know, he gets bested, you know it's going to be a whole lot worse once it goes on. So it's definitely worth checking out. And, you know, like I said, they do flip a lot, which I appreciated. It's not a carbon copy of the original. They do something different. They do come at it at a different angle, which I think is what a sequel should be. So it's definitely a fair sequel. It's or a good one. I will say it's good. Uh, Obviously it has its flaws, but most sequels do. Yeah, I mean, unless we're talking Godfather 2, you're probably not going to have a flawless sequel. But it's nowhere near the bottomless pitfall of like the Halloween franchise or something like that. So it's definitely worth checking out, but I'm going to get to spoilers. Now, we're supposed to believe that these are just organ traffickers going after this young girl, which, why did I hold that up? Going after this young girl. And they do a good job at just setting these guys up as just being awful. Because when the girl is granted time to go out with this one Navy friend of Stephen Lang that brings him supplies, like she's in a bathroom and this guy walks in. He's like, "Hey, gorgeous, come on, tell me your name." But she's able to get away from him. Well, he's the leader of this gang of human organ traffickers. It doesn't say if they exclusively go after children or not, but you know, knowing that that's what they want is plenty enough to set them up as just bad people. So of course we're already rooting for Stephen Lang, and again, it we really only get like that one scene of her going from hiding under the bed to under the uh was it a Davenport or the big dresser that opens up this way. She hides under one of those. She gets over the railing and hangs on, then drops into the foyer, then makes it down to the basement and into the container. I do think it should have shown more, not just because I liked the cat and mouse stuff with the silent audio and the tracking shots, but because it made a point to show how rigorous he is with her survival training. I feel like it definitely would have benefited more from showing more of it. But it doesn't really do that. So, we think that's just what they're going for. But then, it gets to a point where the leader, Raylan, says like, "Hey little girl, we're not the ones you should be afraid of. Why don't you ask him who you are? Ask him who your parents are." You know, then he yells out, "Do you want to tell her or do you want us?" And then, of course, Stephen Lang jumps out, freaks out. So now she's kind of confused. And she has this white stripe in her hair. And then the guy walks up to her, takes his hat off. He's got the same one. Not quite sure that's how that works. I went to school with a guy that had that. I think it was a birthmark, but I'm not sure if that specific thing is hereditary, but... And, you know, he says, "Our house burnt down. I thought I lost you. I went to jail for the arson. And, you know, I spent 8 years wondering if I was ever going to see you again." And it makes it sound like, okay, maybe they are traffickers, but I guess he really wants his daughter back. And it doesn't undo a twist. You don't find out that, oh, it's all bullshit. That really is her dad. But even then, okay, well, the twists really aren't surprising. This, I would say, is a twist you won't see coming. Literally. Pun intended. This one, it's going to have to come into play because it's like, okay, he's got his daughter back, but they made a point to not only say there's organ traffickers out there, but to show a cooler in the back of the truck. So, there's something else up with them. He takes her back to the hotel where they all stay. A nice big hotel. He says, tells her more about herself, but she has the option to leave. She wants to go to this convent. Is that what it's called? Like the Catholic orphanage or group home. That's where she wants to go, so she starts going there, but then she hears a woman's voice singing the song, which is a song that we hear her sing a couple times throughout the film. And she keeps asking about her mother. She asked Stephen Lang, like, do I look like my mother? She asked this Raylan guy, like, well, was she pretty? Do I look like her? And when she turns around, she sees this paraplegic woman in an electric wheelchair who looks very sick, singing the song to her. Find out that's her mother. Kind of looks like Helena Bonham Carter from Fight Club, or a role like that. And that's when you find out that she's dying and needs a heart transplant. That's the only reason why they wanted her back. They don't love her. They don't want her back in their lives. They just want her heart for her. Because when she asks, how are you dying? Like, how'd you get sick? She says, well, the fire that was in our house, and the way she explains it, you can definitely tell where it's going. We had a kitchen in our basement where we'd cook food, and caught the house on fire. And the chemicals that we used to cook burnt my insides, and I got sick. So, yeah, they're meth dealers also. And then we get a scene where one of the guys is talking to another one. He's like, if she dies, she's our cook. If she dies, there's no product, there's no us. So they're willing to give up their own daughter for her heart, not only so she can live, but also so they can keep their meth going. So, it went from taking Stephen Lang from the first film, who makes us not root for him, to having to root for him, to making him look like a kidnapper somewhat. He didn't kidnap her, he found her and took her, but, to her being reunited with her family, but then finding out, oh, they're just despicable, they want to keep their meth going. And they're not the traffickers, I guess, but they have the surgeon that is part of the trafficking. And so then it makes us root for Stephen Lang again. And that, I think they did a good job with the roller coaster of who's more evil and who's the better person. And I do think Stephen Lang does have some redemption at the end. Another spoiler, I'm glad there won't be a Don't Breathe 3, because I do think it would get ahead of them, and, it was already a risk after, because of how good this film is. But Stephen Lang is able to stop everything. He gets there, kills everyone. There is one guy that objects to all this. He tells Stephen Lang they're going to kill her. That's not cool. They're about to leave because they cut the power. They're going to leave with the surgeon. And there's this showdown. And a pretty cool setting. which is where the pool of the hotel is. Deep ass pool, but it's empty. So I mean, you have Stephen Lang and Raylan fighting, but Stephen Lang throws off these greenhouse smoke bombs, smoke grenades, which blinds that guy, so brings him down to his level. But they have their fight. The guy just starts shooting. He ends up shooting his wife, but the girl's handcuffed to her. And like when she dies, she lands on the joystick, so it makes the wheelchair go into the pool. So she's like hanging by the handcuffs. So she's got to get Stephen Lang's machete and start hacking at the mother's arm. But eventually, Stephen Lang grabs the guy by the head. He's like, "You'll see what I see," and just thumbs his eyeballs out. And his redemption is he yells at her to say, "Don't come near me. You shouldn't be around me. I'm a bad man. I killed." I think he does admit that he's raped, even though he talked about how he despises the act of rape in this film. I think that's what he says. But I'm no father. You deserve a lot more. But then Raylan wasn't dead. He stabs him. Then she stabs Raylan. He falls in the pool and dies. And then he dies in her arms. Not that he dies. She covers up his stab wound, and then he moves her hand so he can bleed out. And she says, "But I can save you," and he says, "You already have." I guess saying she's made him happy, see what he is, and it's time for him to die. And then she makes her way to that orphanage where it's suggested that's where she's gonna live. So I'm glad they made it so there can't be a Don't Breathe 3. Again, it was probably, I think it was a huge risk. I'm always skeptical and I always get worried. I mean, like, I would be super worried if there was a It Follows 2, It Comes at Night 2, The Lodge 2, The Babadook 2, or, anything like that. The Witch 2. I'm not a big fan of sequels, especially if it's a really, really, really good film that does something different with the genre enough to stand out. Very stylish, everything about it works, because sequels tend to just feel like cash-ins. This did really feel like a cash-in, which is another compliment I can give it. It doesn't feel like they were just trying to milk the Don't Breathe cow. It does feel like they had an idea that they wanted to share. I would say it was worth it, because, I mean, they did tell the same story twice. They did raise the stakes. They did flip-flop a lot of things, a lot of emotional investments, and even twists that you can see coming a mile away. I would still say they worked narratively. Definitely worked for the story. And, this was Sayaga's directorial debut, like Alvarez was with the Evil Dead remake. Alvarez is a very competent director. I loved his direction in this film. He did do a good job at making it look like, Alvarez's original vision, with his, flowing with that style and that kind of aesthetic and visual style and everything. It did do a good job with that. I guess it just had too little of what I liked in the first film, like just that silent sneaking around with great camera work, cat and mouse stuff, and more action-packed, which I've never cared about, which is why I like the collector more than the collection. Why I like Alien more than Aliens, but I do understand sequels. You got to go bigger. Not as good as the first one, definitely, but it's as worthy of a sequel as it could have been. And I mean, a, 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 a good, interesting way to finish the story of the blind man as well. So, yeah, that's Don't Breathe 2. I was definitely surprised by it. I was expecting this to be a cheap cash in that, would probably dilute this and make this one not stand out as much. But no, it definitely took what was good in the first film and told another story in its own way. I support sequels if you're gonna tell the story a different way or come at it from a different angle or really change it up but still stay in the spirit of the first one, which I think this one did. So that's Don't Breathe 2. It went a little bit longer than I wanted to, but oh well. Anyway, thank you for watching.